welcome to Unity of Tacoma. We are so happy that you're here with us this morning. And this month, we're actually going to be talking some about being open and receptive to our divine good. And the affirmation we're going to be using this week is I am open and receptive to the infinite flow of divine abundance. Every day I receive and I give freely, trusting that good is always flowing to and through me. And so, as we get ready to get started this morning, what I want to do is have us a piece of music to get us rocking and rolling today. Okay, it seems we're having a little bit of a glitch with our Zoom this morning, so let me see if we can try this again. Of your dreams. And that was Reverend Michael Gott presenting that for us. And so now I want to turn it over to Victoria for some announcements.
Well, good morning, everybody. First thing I want to report is that yesterday was Sandwich Saturday, where we made our 100 sack lunches. We had lots of donations in the form of clothing and bedding, and we had 12 volunteers there working yesterday. Great team, lots of laughter, really good coordinated work. My goodness, we're working like a machine. We're doing so well. And we have so much fun. We even included a small birthday party yesterday honoring one of our volunteers who is visiting from Boston. So it was really a great time. Our next Sandwich Saturday will be August 1st. And we're meeting a little earlier now. Instead of 11 o'clock, we're trying to meet between 10:45 and 10:30, because that's when people are getting there. And if you get there at 11, a whole lot of the work is already done. So we're meeting a little earlier. That's how much enthusiasm we have going. So that's really great. And that's the latest and greatest for me. I hope you all have a wonderful week and enjoy this wonderful weather we're having. And hold all those people who are wet or too hot in our cool prayers. Have a great week.
All right. Thank you so much for that. So let's go ahead and do our prayer for protection. And so if you would, I will speak the words that are in black. And if you would, then repeat back and affirm the truth of the words that are in the highlighted blue. So the light of God surrounds us. I am that light. The love of God enfolds us. I am that love. The power of God protects us. I am that power. And the presence of God watches over us. I am that presence. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well. And we've got another piece of music coming up, and I want to change this up because I don't need to be down in the bottom corner there for with our next song. So let's take it and go with it.
Here we go. God is my source. God is my power. God gives me everything I need. So I give thanks for all my blessings. God gives me everything I need. That's the whole thing. God is my source. God is my power. God gives me everything I need. So I give thanks and all my blessings. Everything that I need, God gives me everything. When I don't know what to do, God gives me everything. Everything I need. Everything.
Okay, I'm not sure what all's been going on here with our technology this morning, but we're going to move through it. It's so funny because I will do a rehearsal with all of this stuff several times before we go live. And you know what? It works smoothly and perfectly until we go live. So, anyway, we're just going to enjoy the abundance. And if you were able to hear that music, that was Karen Drucker. And so we're so grateful to have Karen as one of our beloved New Thought Music singer-songwriters. So good morning again. I'm Reverend Becky Whitehead, and it is my honor to be with you this morning and to be talking about abundance. So, today we're on an exploration of abundance. It's not simply things that we possess, but it's a state of consciousness that we cultivate. And when we hear the word of abundance, sometimes we may think about money or income or possessions or financial security. And those things are part of the human experience. And there's nothing unspiritual about desiring stability and sufficiency and the resources necessary to live our purpose. And yet in unity, prosperity is understood as something much greater than material wealth. Prosperity includes the consciousness of this all sufficiency. It includes love and peace and wisdom and creativity. It includes friendship, health, opportunity, and it includes our purpose and our ability to begin again. That's one of the things that I really honor who we are as unity individuals and the teachings that we have. Because no matter if we get off track, we always have that ability to begin again and to reset our course. Sometimes it's that recalibration of the GPS. We're correcting our journey, we're correcting our path. Charles Fillmore taught, one of our co-founders, he taught that prosperity begins in consciousness. And in his book, Prosperity, he explains that the visible conditions of our lives are influenced by the ideas that we hold and cultivate. So before abundance becomes a circumstance, it begins as an awareness of divine possibility. An abundance mindset is that spiritual realization that we live, move, and have our being in a field of infinite potential and divine good. And so our affirmation that we're using this month is, I am open and receptive to the infinite flow of divine abundance. Every day I receive and give freely, trusting that good is always flowing to and through me. So just hold that for a moment. Those opening words, I am open and receptive. Those are the key right there. The good of God is already present. The good of the universe is already here and present, but we have to be willing to recognize it and to receive it and to cooperate with it. I can't tell you how many times I've had people, and I've sat in spiritual counseling with individuals, and they say, I keep praying about this, and I keep holding that this is going to happen, and this is going to come to me. And in the next breath, they say, but I just don't know. Well, as soon as they say that, but they're closing themselves off to being receptive. And so it's so important that we remove the word but from our vocabulary, especially when we're looking at manifestation of those things in our lives. And so there's a little side note there. Remove the but from your world. So, the first foundational unity principle that we're taught is that God is absolute good, everywhere present. And so what this means is God is not distant from us. It's not separate from us. Not an occasionally available source. Source or God, by whatever name you refer to it, is not withholding good from some while granting it to others. Can you imagine? Think about a Friday night football game. Every high school, every coach, every team that they do a pray in when they circle up is praying for victory. Well, God's not picking the winners. It's all about how they're performing, how they're living into their truth, and how they're being. So God is that one presence and that one power, active in the universe and in our lives. Active is the word there. When we affirm abundance, we're not trying to persuade God to bless us. We're awakening to the spiritual richness, to the truth, to that divine good that is already present and available. So it's not like God isn't listening. God is always present. God is always available in all ways. But it's whether or not we're tuned in. That's the big piece. When we are claiming that, we are owning it, and we are being present to what is available to us. Our brother and way shower, Jesus, he said, it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. And in unity, the kingdom of God is understood metaphysically as the realm of divine ideas and the spiritual potential within us. And it's not merely some distant place that we enter after death. It's that state of consciousness that we can experience right now, right this very second. The kingdom is within us, and that includes faith. It includes wisdom. It includes imagination. It's also in that realm is the presence of love and strength and understanding, order, zeal, release, life, and power. That sounds like the 12 powers or the 12 attributes that we teach. I wonder where that came from. Anyway, so these are just among, these are the 12 spiritual powers that Charles Fillmore identified as faculties of that true divine nature, faculties of that Christ nature within each and every person. And I know sometimes we use that word Christ, and that kind of sets us apart. But so for me, it's the faculty of the divine nature, because you don't have to be a follower of Jesus, our brother and way shower, to have that divine nature, but it's available to everyone. And so therefore, when we say the kingdom is within, We are affirming that the spiritual resources we need are already present in potential. They're already there. It's just a matter of us being open and receptive to them. So, one of the central teachings in Unity Prosperity Consciousness is that God is our source. A job may be a channel, it may be an avenue, or a particular client may be that, or a family member, or a bank account might be the channel, might be the representation that we're using. A business, a pension, an investment, the congregation, or unexpected opportunities may be the channel. But no individual person or institution or circumstance is the ultimate source of our good. That may be the method, but it's not the basis of the origination. God is the source. And Charles Fillmore repeatedly distinguished between the divine source and the outer channels through which good appears. When we mistake a channel for source, we become fearful. Oh my gosh, what if that changes? We may believe that if one job ends, our supply is ended. Or if we go to someone for support and they say no, that there's nothing available. And so if one opportunity closes, and if we stay true to holding the facts that our source isn't in these worldly things, our source comes from a much higher power, there will be something else to come our way. Our channels may change, but the source, the foundation of our good remains constant. The source of divine ideas, it remains. The source of courage, it's right there. The source of wisdom and creativity and love, it's ever present. But, the other part of this is it doesn't mean that change is easy. If we've gone around and felt like, oh, well, that person is my source of love because they're my soulmate, they're this. And if that blows up in our face, that's recognizing that's not necessarily true. They're not the source of my happiness. The source of my happiness is that spiritual presence, that divine presence. And so when something happens like this, when we lose a job, it's not necessarily easy. But what it means is that there is no external change that can diminish the presence of God within us and around us. Myrtle Fillmore learned this truth in relation to healing. She turned away from the belief that the outer appearances had the final word, and she began to speak words of life to her body. She didn't deny what she was experiencing. She chose to affirm a deeper spiritual reality. In the same way, prosperity consciousness does not deny financial or practical challenges. We know this. We know that, I don't know of anybody in my personal life who has gone through from the time of birth until this present moment without at some point facing a challenge or a financial question. But what happens is when we live into this truth, we know and we refuse to let those challenges define the whole truth of our lives. This is just a momentary experience. In Unity, we talk a lot about lack or scarcity, and I'm going to use the word scarcity today. Scarcity is not the experience of having limited resources, but scarcity can become a pattern of thought. Scarcity consciousness says there's never enough, or I'm going to miss my chance, or someone else's success means that there's less available for me. Or I've got to hold so tight onto everything that I'm almost choking it. And sometimes we may get into this pitiful me thing and say, I'm unsupported and I've been forgotten. But Unity teaches that thoughts are formative. And this doesn't mean that every difficult circumstance is caused by one isolated negative thought. It means that the beliefs that we constantly entertain, those are the beliefs that influence what we notice, what we expect, what we choose, and then what we express. Fillmore taught that the ideas are the foundational expression, and divine ideas, accept into consciousness, can become the basis for new experiences. So let's even go back a little further. I'm sure you're familiar with Rumi. And a quote of Rumi is, "What you seek is seeking you." And what I'll tell you is it goes both ways. So whatever you're seeking, if it's abundance, then abundance is flowing. Whatever you're seeking, whatever you're putting energy into, if it is a sense of lack or scarcity, and if you fuel that, then you have the opportunity probably to have an experience around that. And so, therefore, when scarcity thoughts arise, we don't condemn ourselves, but we observe them, and then we redirect our attention towards spiritual truth. We may say, at this moment, I'm facing a financial challenge. The key there is at this moment. And, that's probably an honest statement for some of us from time to time. But we don't have to continue with it. We don't have to go into that, oh, therefore I'm powerless and I've been abandoned. But instead we affirm this condition is temporary. Source is present. Divine wisdom is active within me. New ideas are available, and I'm guided toward my next right step. And unity doesn't ask us to deny the facts. It asks us to recognize that the facts are not always the final spiritual truth. A condition may be real, but it's not necessarily permanent. It's all temporary. Fillmore emphasized that substance is not limited to physical objects or money. And in unity metaphysics, divine substance is the underlying spiritual reality from which ideas, opportunities, they form and then they emerge. Prosperity often begins with an idea. An idea may become a conversation. A conversation may become a partnership. A partnership may become a new opportunity. A new opportunity may transform a life. And perhaps the abundance we need today is first the abundance of wisdom. Perhaps it is the courage to make a phone call, or maybe it's the willingness to ask for help. And perhaps it is the imagination to see the possibility that we had previously overlooked. Perhaps it's the strength to make a necessary change. Divine abundance frequently reaches us through the mind as guidance or inspiration or insight. I have stuff like this happen all the time. There'll be an idea and it'll pop through and I'll go, okay, I need to get back to that. Well, sometimes it never happens. I never get back to it, and then it might fly through again. I'm like, I was going to get back to that. Let me deal with that right now. I had a situation myself this past week, and it has to do with, it's abundance and things are fine. The banking systems in Canada for savings accounts and don't pay interest. And so I have an account in Canada that's US funds. And I'm like, I don't like the idea that my money's sitting there and it's not working for me. Well, I made that statement probably a month ago. Pop mind. Okay, you need to do something and put that money somewhere else. Okay. So day before yesterday, I got an email from American Express. They have a high yield savings plan that is paying 3%. And for a savings account, that's not bad. So what did I do? I finally got off my rear and took care of it. I moved the money over. But see, that was something, it kept popping in my mind, but it was like, okay. And what I learned a long time ago, though, is sometimes our action is to be patient and to wait and to be open to the answers. And so it might come in the form of an email. It might come from a big company. It might come from just a conversation with a friend. But it's also important to remember that, prayer and meditation are essential to our prosperity practices. And so if I hold in prayer and in consciousness the right and perfect opportunity for my funds to work for me is coming. It will show up and I will know it and recognize it when it appears. And so when we're in that silence, we become receptive to that divine idea. And that divine idea is usually trying its best to express through us. And so be aware, be awake and aware, and pay attention. We become more receptive as we practice. And, Myrtle Fillmore encouraged people to enter into a living relationship with that indwelling presence of God. She taught that prayer is not begging an external power to change its mind, but that prayer is a way of aligning our minds and hearts with divine truth. To become receptive is to release the belief that our good must arrive in only one particular way. Okay, so mine for this past week, on one occasion, it arose through an email. It could have very well come through a conversation, but I wasn't locked into how it was going to show up, but I was locked in that I would recognize it when it appeared. Sometimes we pray for an answer while secretly deciding what the answer has to look like. We pray for support, but insist that it must come from a particular person. We pray for prosperity, but we believe that it must come from maybe a particular job. Maybe some people are praying for prosperity and they think it's going to come through a lottery ticket. I've been there, done that. We pray for healing, but we imagine that there can only be one pathway. So it's about being open and receptive. When we're receptive, we say, Spirit, I am open. I release attachment to this one specific form, and I welcome the divine ideas. I'm willing to recognize the good in expected and unexpected ways. Now, this doesn't mean that we abandon discernment. Unity teaches us to turn within to that divine presence and to listen for inner guidance. So being receptive means becoming available to divine direction and then acting upon that guidance with wisdom. And there's another piece. And this is something that comes up every time I teach a prosperity class. And it's the fact that we have to be comfortable with both giving and receiving. Most of the people that I know, they have giving hearts and they're good at giving and all of that. But boy, you try to buy them a cup of coffee and you almost have a fight on your hands. And the whole thing is when we do that, we are blocking that flow, that universal law of giving and receiving. And people will gladly offer prayer and encouragement and support and time and resources to others. But when someone offers it to them, oh, how quickly they can refuse. No, I'm good. Thank you. I appreciate that. No, I got it. And sometimes this resistance grows from an unconditional belief that they're not worthy. But our second unity principle teaches us that every person is divine in essence, and we are each an expression of God. I can't tell you how many times I've had these conversations with people. And if we're living in a flow of abundance, we're living in the abundance of giving and receiving, both. And so if you offer something to me and I go, oh, no, it's okay. What I'm doing is I'm blocking your good because it feels great to do for someone. It feels great to give. But does it feel great when someone says no and blocks us from being that giving heart? Well, not necessarily. And so what I usually teach is when someone offers, the first thing that I would say is, are you sure? And when they say yes, say, okay, thank you. I am open to receive. And go from there. When we look at the fact that we are all expressions of God, it doesn't mean that the human personality is perfect, but it means that our deepest identity is spiritual and it is sacred. And receiving graciously is the one way of honoring that truth. Receiving isn't selfish. Receiving allows another person to express generosity. Receiving keeps good in circulation. And receiving says, I recognize this blessing and I accept it with gratitude. Myrtle Fillmore often encouraged people to speak lovingly and respectfully to themselves. And she understood the healing and wholeness requires us to stop condemning ourselves. And that same truth is true. That same thing is true of prosperity. We cannot fully receive while conditionally declaring ourselves unworthy of it. We can practice saying, I am a beloved expression of God. I am worthy of divine love. I am open to support, and I receive good with gratitude, and I use it wisely. And so gratitude is one of our most powerful practices for developing prosperity consciousness. And it doesn't mean that we're pretending that everything is perfect, but it means noticing the good and the good that is present while we're remaining open to that greater good. We're taught that Thanksgiving is a special force that helps us to recognize and increase our awareness of good. And when we give thanks, we shift our attention. We move from asking only what is missing to asking what is already here. A friend who calls, a meal that nourishes us, a safe place to rest. Maybe it's a needed conversation or a new idea, a moment of beauty. I love this land of, North America, because all you have to do is open your eyes and there is beauty to behold, and just be present to it. Sometimes it has to do with our ability, it has to do with our ability to try again if we don't succeed at something. The presence of this spiritual community, this blessing may appear ordinary, but abundance is often hidden within the ordinary. And gratitude, it helps us see what fear has caused us to overlook. I'd like to take a moment and just talk a little bit about one of our Bible stories. And it's the story of the loaves and fishes. And I want to give you a little bit of a unity interpretation. The story of loaves and fishes contains a profound prosperity lesson. The disciples looked at the crowd and they saw lack. They focused on the number of people and that small amount of food because their consciousness was fixed on insufficiency. They were still learning. They were still being shown by the master teacher what this was all about. And so when they came to Jesus with that, he began with what was available. He took the bread and he blessed it and he gave thanks and he shared it. And so metaphysically, Jesus represents that Christ consciousness within us, the awareness that sees beyond the appearances and recognizes divine possibility. The loaves and the fishes, what those represent are the resources and the ideas already available to us, even when they appear small. And so that disciples, that represents that part of consciousness that calculates only according to appearances. Oh, I bet I'm the only one that ever gets caught up and just seeing what's there and not allowing myself to be open to the potential, right? So, but that divine consciousness, it asks a different question. It asks what is present that can be blessed and circulated. And Jesus, he didn't despair the small beginning. He didn't go, oh man, let me see what I can do. I'm not sure. No, he took it and he blessed it. He gave thanks and he placed it into circulation. And what we know the end of that story? There was plenty. There was enough. And there was some left over. There was more than enough. And wouldn't that be a great way to live your life? Take all the blessings that are available to you, that have that awareness that they are there, and bless them and watch them multiply. So what's in your hands today? What idea or talent or relationship, what experience or small opportunity is there? Don't dismiss it because it seems like it's not enough or it's inadequate. Bless it. Give thanks for it. Use it wisely and allow it to become the beginning of something greater. So each morning, I want to invite you over the course of the next week or two to spend a few moments in the silence and affirm for yourself, God is my source. Divine ideas guide me. I am open and receptive to my good. And so then, if you would, at that point, after you affirm that, name 3 forms of abundance that are already present in your life. And I bet you can come up with more than 3. And if you can't, then that would tell me that my eyes aren't open enough. I'm not seeing enough. Okay? And so if you start your morning that way, then at the end of the day, you might say, where did I see good today? What divine ideas came to me, and how did I respond? And so this practice moves prosperity from theory into lived experience. And Unity's 5th principle reminds us that it's not enough to merely know the spiritual truth, but we have to practice the truth that we know. And so as I begin to close out this time of this talk, beloved, divine abundance is not far away. The kingdom is within you. Divine wisdom is calling within you. Creative power is within you. Faith and love are within you. You're not separate from the source of good. And so today we release the belief that outer appearances have the final word. We open our minds and our hearts. We open our lives. And I want to say one more time our affirmation for this month. And so if you will, just hold it. If you need to close your eyes or whatever, or put your hand over your heart and claim this as your truth. I am open and receptive to the infinite flow of divine abundance. Every day I receive and give freely, trusting that good is always flowing to and through me. Oh, and so it is, and so it is. And so I think we're going to close out this time. I'm going to play some music to get us ready for our affirmation. Ready for our meditation. And so let me see if I can get this one to work appropriately. And enjoy.
What if a prayer is not a plea, a desperate call with tears that fall on bended knee, but breathing out and breathing in, it's God in me that lives and breathes, my trusted friend. My life is a prayer that God is praying. My thoughts are words that God is saying. My laughter is the sound of angels playing. My life is a prayer that God is praying. What if today I had the chance to move and sway? God leads the way in my life's dance. What if I knew without a doubt, no need to fear, God's right here within, without. My life is a prayer that God is praying. My thoughts are words that God is saying.